Hello and welcome to Stephen University. This is, of course, the second part of our Bismuth conversation. Before we get into that, just want to say, if you're listening to this and you're confused, we split the conversation in half due to time constraints and a few other factors. For an explanation of that and for the full first part of this discussion, you can just find it either on iTunes or YouTube or however you listen to this now by going to the previous episode. It might be in the related videos on YouTube or in the description below if I remember to put it there. Apologies as well if this doesn't seem as balanced as it could have done. Basically, I think in length, in terms of just the conversation that we originally recorded, where I split it, there was 38 minutes on the first half and 34 or 35 on the second half. It was just I had to find the most convenient place to do the snip, and that was where it landed. You know, anywhere else earlier than that, and it would have made the first part like 25 minutes instead, because the conversation flows quite naturally for a while, and it made it really hard to find like an edit point. That was the best place I could find to edit it. The other downside being that even though this one is 35 and that one was 38, you go, oh, that's only a few minutes difference down. The problem is this half is the half that contains the 5 minutes of me and Chris confusedly discussing how we're going to actually put the episode out, which is amusing in that it's a weird insight into some of the weird conversations we have when we start trying to plan out this podcast, but probably not the most relevant thing to have in the podcast. And I would have rather, if I was going to choose which half would have been longer, it would have been this half in order to make that feel less of a thing. So yeah, in a weird way, it's not really full 35 minutes of discussion about Bismuth. But you know what? If you're not used to tangents at this point, then, you know, what can I say? That's kind of our thing. So yeah, that's everything for me sort of explaining what's going on. If you haven't already heard the first part, that is available. If not, enjoy the second half of our Bismuth conversation. One minor criticism I had of this episode, if you don't mind me, is I don't know how well they used the Amethyst suspicion plot, because I felt...
That's what I was just about to bring up, actually.
Yeah, because they start it, and it's a cross between suspicion, which you feel is warranted as a viewer, and it could also just be interpreted as Amethyst being a little jealous. But then on top of that, so you spend a few minutes going like, I don't know, they either need to make this one or the other, because it feels like it's trying to be both, and I don't know if that works.
It felt like they'd mapped out this Amethyst Jasper plot, and then realised they wanted to do this. So just tried to keep it lightly still going in the background, but didn't necessarily have the ability or the time, rather, to bring it to the forefront.
And what would have been better, truthfully, would have been to have Amethyst like be the voice of the audience, in that everyone else is like, yay, Bismuth, Stephen wants a new friend, obviously Pearl and Amethyst and Garnet are happy to have their old friend back, and Amethyst be the one that goes, well, wait a minute, why was she, you know, because I think that makes it clearer and actually sort of handles the problem, because then you sort of go, oh, it's this possibility of having an old friend back and earning a new friend that's blinded the other three to the situation. And you could almost then make up for that weird sort of deficit we talked about earlier in the episode, which is like, you know, this idea that they should really be asking more questions. So if you make it seem like they're all just sort of blinded by the joy of having this new old friend back, then you make Amethyst the one in the middle. She's not that fussed about getting a new friend, because she doesn't care, because she's Amethyst. She doesn't care about anything. And she's also not excited about having an old friend back, because she didn't know Bismuth before, so she's uniquely positioned to be the sensible one asking questions. Because you can believe Stephen not asking questions, and you can believe Pearl and Garnet getting so excited to have their friend back they wouldn't. So Amethyst is the perfectly positioned gem to be suspicious. So it feels like they were so close to getting it right, but it just needed to be executed in a way that lent more towards suspicion and question asking rather than jealousy. Trying to do both muddles it. Go on.
I agree with you. I do have a devil's advocate, though, to potentially counter that. If you do that, I don't know if you necessarily get the ending we got, because if you do that, you're expecting the end of Stephen versus what can I say? Bismuth. Yeah. Sorry, I forgot what it was. Then I was like, "But mouth."
We have
what's
you know what it is. The listeners have been yelling at you for so long for mispronouncing things that you're now like you're like a weird like
man.
You're like traumatized. You're like you second guess everything you say. It's hilarious.
It's nuts. So you expect the ending of Stephen versus Bismuth to be Amethyst coming down and saving Stephen because Amethyst has followed them because she's really suspicious. If you ramp up that suspicion, you would find yourself going, well, Amethyst is going to appear at any moment. And I love the jeopardy in that fight. You really do find yourself going, Jesus, how's Stephen going to get out of this one? Like, she's a lot stronger than, he is. Like,
maybe another way you could have done it, though. And I do love the way it plays out with just Stephen and Bismuth. I think that's really powerful because it was obviously just Rose and Bismuth the first time because no one else knows what the fuck happened. But would it not have been cool if Amethyst, continuing her suspicion, had gone down to help Stephen and then had hung back and noticed he was handling himself, and then after it had happened and after Bismuth was poofed, Amethyst was the one who stepped forward and just comforted him for a minute before we moved up and explained what was happening to Pearl and Garnet?
No, personally, personally, I don't like that because I think it goes. Even though Amethyst is the slightly crazier one, all three of those gems, Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl,
they wouldn't leave Stephen to fend for himself.
Yeah, they have parental instincts for Stephen, and
Yeah,
I wouldn't buy that she would do that. And also, the thing with doing that is we need to, in order to kind of be on board with this Amethyst Jasper thing, we need all her stuff to be about that. And if you have Amethyst decide suddenly one of her plot points in this arc is she decides to let Stephen be Stephen and handle it because he's got this. I mean, not only does it contradict what happened two episodes ago when Stephen did that and she wasn't happy about it, but I think it goes against those parental instincts. I think I completely agree with you, and a big takeaway for me was also they didn't really do much with the Amethyst suspicion plot, but talking it through, I feel like doing more with that could have potentially jeopardized the ending.
Yeah, it's true. I do still feel like it just makes so much sense, and maybe they didn't need to go all the way with it. So you feel like Amethyst should have been down there with them, but do something to because that's the problem is the plot they do have goes absolutely nowhere because it's like they spend the first 10 minutes going Amethyst is jealous / suspicious. Amethyst ain't happy with this. Something's not right. Amethyst figures, and then Bismuth just gives her a special new whip, and she's like, "Oh yeah, down to Bismuth," and it's like, "What? Like, wait a second."
Kind of fits that character though.
No.
For her to get distracted by shiny objects.
Yeah, it's not out of character. It's you sort of then go from a writing perspective. What's the point of that story? Why even introduce that if you're then just gonna kill it?
Yeah, that's fair, and I agree with that. But
maybe you just keep that. You have it. You make it less about jealousy, slightly more about suspicion, asking questions. But then she forgets all that instantly when you hand her the whip, and then you still can get Stephen and Bismuth.
Jealousy feels like more honest a reaction though. When she first appeared, I was expecting, and when she first appeared, and it became apparent that Amethyst didn't know her. I was expecting the jealousy part.
Which by the way was a genius decision because it would have been so easy to write that Amethyst was like around when Bismuth was around.
Yeah, which I suppose is if you really want to that's the easiest answer. Because like I say, I just feel if you ramp up her suspicions more, you just find yourself going, well, why didn't she follow them? Why isn't she about like?
Yeah, I suppose, but you could also say that because obviously doesn't that happen in the middle of the night?
Yeah, but the gems don't sleep.
True. Oh, they don't need to sleep. I think Amethyst just clarified she does though. But yeah.
Yeah, but again, like Amethyst is really suspicious, but not suspicious enough to interrupt her sleep.
That she doesn't need.
She's not awake at night worrying about this shit. It's really hard. I don't think there's a. I don't think what they did nailed it, but I can see the difficulties in nailing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Should we get to?
Did you have any other?
Just some trivia-y stuff, I guess.
Yeah. Give us the triv.
Give us the triv. The triv. I like that. I like that, Chris. It rolls off the tongue.
Have we not said that before? Have we not? I think we phrased.
We've said trivia, but I don't know if we've ever I don't think we've ever said the Triv.
Well, give us the Triv.
Cartoon Network obviously marks this as the 100th episode, which is weird because it is clearly the 98th and 99th overall episode. The real 100th episode is next week's one, which is called Beta. Obviously, we'll get to that next time.
Is it actually called Beta, though, Dan? Is it actually...
Have I broken your trust?
Is it actually called Better? Is it actually called...
Lion's Shirt.
Weird Gem I don't know?
It's called Lion's Shirt. I've just shuffled the names. The week after that is called Beta. I've just made them all go down one now. Just to confuse you. So yeah, we learned a few things about Bismuth this episode, and it's just nice to recap some of the cool things. So obviously, Bismuth belonged to a worker caste of Gem Society. They were usually construction workers responsible for erecting structures such as spires and arenas, which is cool because obviously the Sea Spire was a part of one of the very first episodes of Steven Universe. It was Cheeseburger Backpack, when they were going to try and save the Sea Spire by putting that statue at the hot top of it while the moon was in the right position, and it would have saved it from sinking into the ocean. They didn't do that because Steven didn't bring it because he filled his Cheeseburger Backpack with everything else. So it's cool to think that Bismuth would have been used to build things like that, and then the arena as well, which has been featured in a recent episode. Obviously, the arena came back in the Steven vs. Amethyst. So it's cool to know that Bismuth, would have been used for that. I just think there's some nice little world building. There's not really much to say on that, but I thought I'd bring it up. Obviously, Bismuth forged Rose's sword, turns out, which is pretty crazy.
Pretty big, yeah.
And again, a really weird part of the Rose tragedy, which someone, again, our listeners are way cleverer than we are, brought up recently. So we were talking about how Rose saw it that humans could change, and maybe, and Gems, she didn't feel like Gems could. So maybe a small part of her decision making was becoming someone who could grow and change and learn. And while that has technically worked, because we proved in this episode, Steven does handle things different to Rose in many respects. The real tragedy of that situation is she was surrounded by gems that had proven they could change. Pearls were subservient, and this Pearl broke that mold and was willing to join a rebellion and fight for a different cause. Garnet was
slight counter to that, is she did then become very servient to Rose.
True,
she loved her, so.
Yeah, so I don't know if you, but the fact that she was able to break out of her existing subservience at all is a proof a gem can change and do something different and break away from that. Garnet, obviously, a massive contradiction to Gem Society's way of where everything should be. You certainly don't sort of mix gems together when you fuse. That's crazy. That's insane. Why would you do that? So yeah, the permafusion and the existing as a being that represents love and all that stuff is completely outside of Gem Society's usual their societal norms. So Garnet is a big thing for change, and even Amethyst, who is a character that is very much not what she is supposed to be, And then you look at Bismuth, who's a character that Rose herself changed. You don't have to just, you can do what do you want to do? What do you want to do? I'd love to build weapons. I'd love to fight this society that forces people like me to build spires all the time. Maybe I want to make weapons or do something else or battle or whatever. Yeah, okay, you can do that. So Rose literally helped another gem change, and yet she still felt gems couldn't change, and that is so tragic. That she couldn't see it because it was right under her nose that everyone around her was changing. Gems are capable of change. They just come from a really messed up society that doesn't allow it and doesn't approve of it. So it's not that humans are necessarily better at changing. It's that humans are permitted to because of the societal differences, and the fact she couldn't see that and maybe potentially partly gave up her form to give herself the potential to be a bit human. Shows she really didn't always see the things that were right under her nose, and again, there is an element of sort of a beautiful tragedy to it, and that really does. I think that lands between this episode and the Greg the Babysitter episode. It really does make her character seem like really fascinating and flawed in ways she hasn't felt so far. Like, she's always been just interesting and mysterious, but the more we learn, she continues to be interesting. And you'd think the more you reveal about a thing you've kept a mystery, the less of a mystery it would be, therefore the less interesting it would be. No, she becomes more interesting as we learn more, because she was clearly complicated in a way that characters like this usually are not. And I think that's really powerful, and I think that's really good. I think that's something the writers are doing such a stellar job with, and it's why these later episodes of the show, while feeling different to the early ones, are still so good. It's that they're finding new and interesting ways to blow my mind every week. And this recent Rose stuff in the episodes we're watching, doing this, rewatching them particularly is making me consider all sorts of stuff I hadn't done previously. And I think that underlying tragedy really makes Rose's character even more interesting than I initially anticipated.
Yeah, there's so much depth to the writing, as we've said before. It's crazy.
In terms of other stuff, this obviously I mentioned already. This is the first time Stephen poofed a non-corrupted gem. That's in the things we already knew that. Stephen is able to hear. Wait, no. Oh, wait a second. Oh, yeah. Stephen is able to hear Bismuth talking inside Lion's mane. Gems must somehow be able to transmit sound through airless environments or vacuums.
Oh, that's a cool notion. Yeah, I hadn't picked up that. That's cool.
Yeah, because technically their physical forms don't exist. They're made up of light.
Yeah, of course. That makes sense.
They don't need to breathe. They don't need air. But the idea they can still make sound go, even in an airless environment, is interesting. But because they're beings from space, you've got to imagine. And there's another thing here that I can't read out because it references a future episode. But there is another episode in the future where a gem demonstrates this ability.
Okay, cool.
That's cool. So it's consistent. I'll mention it when we get to it. It's not far from now, but yeah.
Okay.
Bismuth claims Rose was made on Earth. However, this is contradictory to Rose's statement voiced by Pearl that refers to Homeworld as her home in Rose's scabbard. However, if Rose was made on Earth, she would still be made for Homeworld, meaning the latter would still technically be designated home planet. So... yeah, interesting.
So that's either deep mythology or an error.
yeah. So either they've not quite decided and it's adjusted slightly in the time, it's been a bit retconned or not. Bismuth is obviously the third gem shown to eat food. She's shown, the other two being Stephen and Amethyst, she's shown eating pizza in the episode. Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, I love that Stephen and Bismuth are enjoying a pizza. Amethyst, again, not to do the same as anyone else, eating a burrito. No obvious reason. A really
it
interesting...
wasn't even a no. It wasn't a burrito, was it? It was like a weird, like she put the dough, or maybe she put a burrito in a pizza. But we see her make that. She wraps it up and
really,
and it's like a pizza burrito thing. Yeah, I
remember it looking like a burrito, but I could be.
No, but we see her make it. Like it's definitely if it's a burrito. I thought it looked like raw dough, but it might have been a burrito in the pizza rolled up, but we definitely what she's eating when they're eating, we see her.
Oh, that's
we
cool.
See
Let me
her
pull it up.
make.
I've got it in front of me. Oh, you're right. So it's like, yeah, she dumps like dough or a burrito in a pizza. She throws chaps on top of it, then rolls the whole thing up. It's a pizza with a burrito or dough. And sorry, oh, yeah, you're right. I must have glanced away at the exact wrong second there. That's really interesting. Well, there you go. It's pretty cool. But again, Amethyst determined not to eat what everyone else is eating.
Yeah. That
actually, we didn't.
I didn't want you to get yelled at in the comments for because I'm sat here.
I appreciate that, Chris. What's interesting as well, actually, can I just say?
I'd yell at you on air.
Yeah, why not? The other thing I wanted to very quickly mention, actually, because I just think this is funny. What was it? Oh yeah, we forgot to mention the egg salad thing. I think from the last episode. Where really early in the episode, Amethyst is just putting eggs down the blender, like the food disposal thing in the house, and then they go, "What are you doing?" She's like, "Making egg salad." And then she goes with Stephen to do the training and stuff, and he wins. And this is in last week's episode. And then she comes back out, and you just see her eating her egg salad out of the sink, which I thought was gross and amazing. Really weird one, Chris, because there's literally no one can explain what's happened here. But this episode is banned in the UK after a single airing for completely unknown reasons.
Why?
Literally don't know. So presumably either they made a call at Cartoon Network, something about the episode didn't feel appropriate, or they got some complaints about an element of this episode and decided just to play it safe. Because Cartoon Network UK obviously operate independently to any of the other Cartoon Networks, so they made a choice at some point not to continue airing it, and it's never been repeated in this country.
Did they think it was too violent, maybe, or something?
That my theory is that parents complained about the sort of Stephen basically stabbing Bismuth with a sword, because that's how you could interpret it.
Yeah, that would be my assumption. Yeah.
Which is crazy, really, because I think, like you, the way it's shot, it's so ambiguous. It's like it's. I think it's really.
Yeah.
You know what? Considering some of the violence in other shows that aired over the years on Cartoon Network, like. The fact that I got a complaint. If that is the reason, that's crazy. They used to air Dragon Ball Z on Cartoon Network. Like, there's so much violence in that show. Like, I couldn't even. They cut it out of the Cartoon Network airing. But there's an episode of Dragon Ball Z where someone with a horn drives that horn through someone else's chest, and then when the blood drips down the horn down their face, they then lick the blood off their face.
That sounds pleasant.
Yeah, I mean, they admittedly edited that little part out of Cartoon Network, but they still show the guy getting driven with the horn through the chest. It's pretty savage. Like, how did that air and that this got complaints? Doesn't matter. Anyway. Steven's drink during the Gems sparring sequence looks similar to an old-fashioned glass bottle of Coke, which is pretty cool. Specifically those commercial little break things, the eye catcher sort of signalizing the return to the show. Features what's known as chibi versions of the crystal gems, which is like the name of that style of artwork, to make the character sort of like smaller, like sort of cuter versions of them. These are similar to the style of eye catchers used in anime, such as Sailor Moon, and I don't watch Yu Yu Hakusho. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But I have seen it in Sailor Moon. I've even seen it. They even have similar sort of stingers at the end of each sort of ad break in like Dragon Ball Z and stuff. So it's a pretty common thing in the world of anime. And based on the size and the characters on the blade, the large sword seen on the wall of the forge could be a reference to Omegamon's grey sword from Digimon, which I vaguely remember from when I used to watch Digimon. And it looks similar enough. I've not put the two pictures up next to each other yet, but very possibly.
As said by one of our listeners, if you think it's a reference, it probably is.
Yeah, it's true. Absolutely true. That should be that's the motto of this podcast, I think, especially when we get to the triv at the end. The breaking point has a similar appearance and function to the Big O's piston punch from the anime The Big O, which I don't watch. But I think I've seen a screen grab with that, and again, pretty sure, they look really similar. So that's probably either a direct reference or a little subtle nod from the design team. It seems that the Steven Universe staff are big into anime, which is cool. I like that it draws from a lot of different
it's nice.
styles and sources. Like, it draws a lot from sort of Western animation, sort of Asian animation, and also video games hugely. So it's cool that they've got so many different reference points. I think that's why the show comes across really with a unique vibe, because it's willing to take inspiration from wherever it's cool. Basically, whatever they think is cool and works for the moment is what they'll use, which I like. Stephen throwing Bismuth's weapon into the lava is shot in a similar way to the way John Connor throws the Terminator's endoskeleton arm into the molten steel in Terminator 2. That's probably a reference. The object, the bubble with Bismuth in it, we've actually discussed on this podcast before, Chris. I don't know if you recall.
No.
So in Lion 3 straight to video, when Stephen goes into Lion's Mane the first time, we talked about the other objects that were visible.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And we talked about there was at the time I think you described it as a round thing, but when you look closer, it is clearly a bubble with a gem inside it. Even then, in Line 3 straight to video. And also the object we talked about was obviously the t-shirt, which we've since had the origins of. There's like a chest, which no one's really looked at yet, and a few other bits and bobs, including, I think, the sword. No, the sword he'd pulled out previously, hadn't he? Because he pulled that out during one of the earlier Line episodes.
He pulled that out separately, I think.
Yeah, but it makes sense that it was also in there. So that's pretty cool. Obviously another reference to Lonely Blade, third one now. Stephen the Sword Fighter, last week's episode, and then this. Pearl has learnt that movies don't have to make sense since Stephen the Swordfire, because she was doing what Bismuth does in this episode, which is criticizing and questioning everything. They also reference the corrupting light, which is the light the attack that Centipede referenced. When Centipede was telling the story of how the gems all got corrupted, there was like a light that seems to have done it, and it's sort of collectively being referred to as a corrupting light. Garnet talks about it here when she refers to Homeworld's final attack, which is cool. Obviously, Pearl references Rose protecting her and Garnet, which is something that Greg has referenced previously in The Return. And Stephen obviously makes in this episode a really cool little nod to Peridot when he talks about gems generally, and potentially Centipede and Lapis as well, when he says that most gems he meets try to kill him first before they become his friends.
Yeah.
Which I thought was beautiful. The last thing I wanted to very, very briefly reference, because I just think this is fan theory, Chris, which is, you could argue that me saying this is a fan theory confirms they have not yet addressed if this is true or not with certainty. Therefore, this doesn't come up in the next
spoiling
30.
Shit down.
Well, I know. Which I suppose will confirm to you that this isn't addressed at least in the next 30 episodes, or whatever's left now. But they talk about pulling a Nephrite pilot out of a ship. It's the first time that gem has been referenced. So now we know there's a gem that exists called a Nephrite. And if you look up the style and visuals of a Nephrite gem, it is a sort of green that you could theorize matches the sort of green of the gem in Centipede. So a popular fan theory is that a uncorrupted Centipede is Nephrite.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. That's pretty cool.
Obviously, the gems as we know them don't necessarily recognize it because it's corrupted. But theoretically, that is a popular theory from what I can gather, and a pretty cool one.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I still love after the episode I did Google Bismuth, and it is a gem that looks really similar. I was like, oh, that's really cool. It's that gem.
It does. Yeah, the Bismuth gems look just like that, don't they? I remember doing the exact same thing because when I looked at it, I was like, oh yeah, that's one of my favorite jokes in this episode, by the way. When Stephen goes, "It's an innie." I love that so much.
That was good.
Yeah, so I think that really works quite well. Because again, they do look just like that, and I think it's really cool that in the show they've made that look so much like it. I think that covers all of it. I'm now worried that based on the length of time of this episode, we've hit an hour for the first time, Chris. I'm thinking that what we might...
It's happened. Yeah. That's happened. We are at an hour. I mean, I checked out half an hour ago. No, I'm joking.
Well,
I am joking.
It's occurred to me that to keep the episode numbering matching what we're doing, maybe the best thing to do here then is to split this in two, which I know throws off poor Cram, who's done the beautiful chart of how our episodes are going to play out. Might have to adjust everything by a week.
I don't know. What do we think?
Because it's logical. We're talking about two episodes, really, in terms of production code. Because episode 100 is listed as beta, and this is 98. Beta would end up being shuffled down to 99 if we make this one, and not intentionally, but we have gone well over our normal time frame. So, do we make this two 30 to 35 minute episodes, depending on how long this goes now, and split it over a week, and then adjust as we need to further down the line or not?
Yeah, but to some degree, we don't put numbers, do we, on the Q&As?
No, we don't.
Or the bonus episodes.
No.
Yeah.
So the episode number is always lined up with the podcast, and now I feel like it doesn't.
We could. This isn't going up next week, is it? It's the week after.
From where we're recording now, I'm not 100% sure, but yes, I think so.
We could do that, and then give people the Q&A, because the Q&A isn't being released on an episode day, is it? Or is it?
It isn't, but I think it'd be weird to number it when we haven't numbered the previous one.
No, but what I mean is, we could, so people don't feel shortchanged, we could give them part 1, then drop the Q&A, and then give them part 2 of this.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be a bit weird.
Yeah, Theoretically.
We could do that. We could. What I'm saying is, we could divide this in two and put it on a day, put it on a week where we've also put up the Q&A, so that we're not shortchanging people.
Yeah. Or
I don't know.
Or one other option as well, Chris, make it even more complicated. We cut this up and do 3 episodes that week. Bismuth Part 1, at top end of the week, Tuesday. Bismuth Part 2, Wednesday or Thursday. Bismuth Part 3, Friday.
Well, you want to make this 3 episodes?
No, sorry, not Business Part 3 Friday. Beta Friday, sorry. I got into a rhythm. That way we don't mess up the existing release schedule.
But if we're going to do that, we might as well just make it an hour-long episode.
Yeah, but then the numbering's all wrong, and that bothers my brain.
I don't think, but the numbering's not, like, the production code-wise, the numbering's wrong. But surely most sites list this episode as whatever number we'd list it on the podcast.
Yes, they would, but they list it as episode 98 and 99. That means, yes, Bismuth would be right, but next week's episode, Beta, which is 100, would be 99, and we'd always be one out going forward. And that hurts my brain.
Well, then we'll divide it up. But I think it's an hour long. We can, I mean, really, I'm sure this conversation isn't interesting for listeners.
You know what, though? I like the idea they're getting a little insight into how the conversations we end up having, like, off mic. Like, yeah, this is sometimes what happens. But it's only
in that case, make this 2. I don't see that we have to go Bismuth better though. I think we go Bismuth Q&A.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, we'll figure it out.
There you go. So it seems weird to plonk the Q&A in the middle of the 2, unless we start the Q&A by being like, we know you want Bismuth Part 2, but here we are with the Q&A. So maybe we go Bismuth Q&A on different days. But I think that's the way to do it. Then if anyone's a bit like, oh, you split an episode in half. 1, it is the length of 2 episodes. Well, it's exactly the same problem with the show. So all we're doing is still emulating the show. And 2, you're also going to get the Q&A this week. So that's hopefully going to, you're going to get 3 episodes of this week.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, man. And then we're going to have to work out, have I interrupted the flow of the bombs by doing this in 2? Oh, we'll have to look into it. Okay. What I'm going to say now is we've clearly not decided, and rather than discuss it in front of you guys, I've got to go look at the dates and times and work out how we're going to split this up. So you guys already know how this has played out. It's just occurred to me. Because if you're listening to this, you're listening to this
part 2.
Yeah, so you already know. But we don't know yet, and that's exciting. I guess closer to the time, once we decide what we're actually doing with this, we'll have to create little stingers for the beginning going, sorry guys, we've had to cut this in half. Come back next time for more.
Yeah, something like that.
No. In fact, listeners of this, you've already heard that. How did we do? Stick a comment underneath. How are the tags?
Either way, I reckon the tag was probably better than whatever this is that we're doing right now.
Yeah, this has been awful. I'm so sorry, guys, that that all occurred to me in like the space of a couple of minutes. I was like, no, what are we going to do? That literally just hit me. I felt really bad that I've now derailed the podcast with talk of how we're going to sort out putting up this podcast, especially in a situation where you guys already know what we've done. This will be the least satisfying conversation we've ever had. It's pointless.
But I reckon you're right. People at first were probably like, oh, this is an insight into how they made the decision. And now people are just like, wrap it up, guys.
Okay, we're wrapping it up. I think that's everything then for this week. I don't think there's anything else about the episode I want to add. Do you want to add anything before we go?
No, I'm good. I think we've talked for 2 whole episodes worth, Dan.
Yeah, that's fair. Any thoughts on? I had a question I had to ask you. Sorry, this is relevant. I have to ask you thoughts on the likelihood of seeing Bismuth again. Keeping in mind, obviously, that I'm 30 episodes ahead and may or may not have. I'm not going to obviously confirm or deny, but from this position, how likely do you think Bismuth will be returning, and how far ahead do you think how long do you think you're going to have to wait till you see Bismuth again?
Probably a fair bit, but yeah, we're definitely seeing her again. Definitely. You don't do a big splashy 100th episode character and never use them again. And it would be really easy to do. They need a weapon. That's it. That's all you need to do to justify unpoofing that character and speaking to her. They need some sort of weapon building.
There you go. It's reasonable. Do you want a little tease for next week? I don't know if we're going to make this a permanent thing.
She could have built the drill a lot sooner than they did, for example.
Could have. Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, the drill to get down. There were a lot of complications building that. You're absolutely right. A bismuth would have been a help. Would have been, excuse the pun, a big help.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Give me a hint.
Give you a little hint because it's nice to do it. I'm always really worried I'm going to get yelled at when I do these, and I don't think any of the hint ones have gone out yet. So we'll find out. Maybe I'll stop doing them at some point in the future. But a little hint for you.
Yeah, man.
Perry's back.
Ooh.
Haven't seen Perry for a little while.
Yeah. I've been
Perry
wondering.
for you next week.
That's cool.
A little Perry for you next
that.
week. Yeah. Anything
that
beta does beta mean anything to you?
How's it spelled?
BETA. Beta. Like alpha,
I'd say
beta,
better.
like the numeral.
Okay. No.
Okay.
I wish I could make something up, but no.
Technically it has been referenced in the show, I believe, in the past. I'd have to double check that, but I think it has technically been referenced.
Fair enough. No, I can't think of
very
anything, I'm afraid.
passingly. So there was a strong chance you wouldn't pick up on it, but yeah, I thought that would be interesting. Okay, cool.
I'm just going back to our random "what are we going to do to split it" mode thing. I'd love it if me talking about needless two-parters where part one doesn't really build to anything and then it just ends. I'd love it if that would happen to be around the half an hour mark.
Oh yeah,
we ended the episode with that.
I might find the split there if I can. That's genius. Yeah, I'll look into that. But anyway, that's everything for this week. Besides that genius idea that hopefully we've managed to make work, that's everything for this week. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
We'll speak to you next time as we discuss beta.